Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Where exactly is it morning?
That is true. I'm getting behind myself, which
Well,
is it's
okay.
odd.
So anywhere west of us, which is everywhere in
Right.
the U.S., any of the Western time zones, it is still actually morning. So I just thought I'd give you some flack.
Thank you.
You've
I
been on
appreciate that.
vacation for a week, so I hope you are well rested and prepared to dive back into it to
Yes.
inform the world about supply chain and its happenings.
Well, admittedly, I might still be on vacation between the ears a bit, but we've got a great show here on this edition. This is the Supply Chain Buzz edition of the show here. And, you know, Greg, as always, the buzz is all about the latest and some of the greatest developments across global supply chain, right?
Yeah, no
And
doubt.
today we have got a very special guest, a repeat guest, the one and only Tevin Taylor with Fedex Supply Chain is going to be joining us right here on the buzz in about 20 minutes. You ready? Are you strapped in?
I hope we're ready. I think we interview a lot of big time execs at big companies here. We don't interview a lot who the last minute before the show starts gets a text from their CEO saying, don't say anything inappropriate. So that should give people an idea of who we're about to talk. I love Tevin. He's got a great gift, super personable, obviously very talented, and obviously a great rapport with his management team.
And he has got his finger on the pulse. So stay tuned to our audience for what should be a very informative discussion, both with Tevin, but also throughout the buzz here today over the next hour.
Yeah.
All right, real quick, want to say hello to Stefan. Stefan's tuned in from Texas, as a matter of fact. Stefan, great to see you again. I always appreciate your contributions.
Young Stefan.
Our dear friend Kathy Morrow Robertson, Logistics T&I.
Oh boy.
Kathy has had several full plates here lately as she between writing analyst articles and
white papers.
Probably got some keynotes stuck in between all the work. But Kathy, great to have you here on the show. And Mir via LinkedIn. I'm not sure where Mir is tuned in from, but great to have you here with us today on the buzz. Okay. Hey, quick programming note before we dive into the headline scan today. So if you enjoyed today's live stream, be sure to check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Today, Greg, we published our latest episode of This Week in Business History. And do you happen to know what the main thrust of the episode was about?
I do. Can I say?
Sure.
Coca-Cola and the birth of the Coca-Cola company. So I happen to have studied that pretty closely. So I'm going to enjoy listening to that episode later today, and I will critique you.
We welcome it. That's the only way to get better. But, you know, I learned a couple of things. I've been around the Coca-Cola story forever, you know, having been in the Atlanta market for, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
But I learned some new things. So really hope you check that out. Of course, we've got Tequila Sunrise dropping on Wednesday. We've got our episode with the Consul General of Mexico in Atlanta dropping on Friday, where it's all about the USMCA. So stay tuned. We've got a very busy podcast schedule, and you can get it and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from.
And don't just one other quick thing, Scott. Sure. We dropped an episode with Rick McDonald, VP of Operations at Clorox Company last Friday. One, is there a single company that has been more in the forefront of this COVID thing? And two, amazing leadership culture at Clorox and an amazing leader in Rick McDonald. So listen to that one as well.
Yeah, great point. Great episode. Got a lot of good feedback on that. Rick's always a wonderful interview, and it's amazing to hear what Clorox has done to keep things on the shelves as much as humanly it would be as possible. It's amazing to see the levels of demand that we've seen in that space.
It was really interesting to hear the story that even with all the preparation they had, they couldn't. I'm not trying to spoil anything here, but they couldn't keep up even with the amount of preparation that they had and the expectations that they could. It goes a lot to explaining the why is this so hard, this episode, as well as, a lot of the leadership lessons that are there.
Yep. I want to say hello to a few quick folks before we jump into the first headline. I like what Pierre has to say here. Good afternoon from Atlanta. home of the buzz. Pierre, you're making our afternoon. Great to have you here on LinkedIn. Of course, we have Latia with us, Latia Thomas, who gave a great interview a couple weeks back. Keith Singleton, who always drops quotable quotes on the buzz. So Keith, you've set a high bar. We're looking forward to your contributions today. Nick Swan. Nick, I believe, is in the Midwest, Ohio, I believe, and he's in supply chain. Nick, great to have you here with us. Cigar is tuned in via LinkedIn from India. Great to have you. And then
after dinner time, where he is, I think he's plus 9.5.
That's right.
To us. So,
I think you're right as well.
Thanks for staying up late.
Surya also tuned in from India. Great to have you here. Okay, so let's dive right into this first story here today, Greg. And it's been a busy, July 4th did not stop global supply chain. It kept right on humming along.
Yeah.
So a lot of chatter last week. Perhaps one of the biggest developments that got a ton of buzz last week was around the $700 million loan to YRC worldwide. So I want to get your take on this in a minute, Greg. I'm going to make sure I've got my seatbelt fastened before we do. But let me lay some groundwork, a few background details for our audience. So, look, this has been reported by a wide variety of outlets. I chose this story from the Wall Street Journal. It's one of our favorites. Of course, Jennifer Smith is a wonderful industry reporter there with the Wall Street Journal. So the U.S. government is lending $700 million in coronavirus stimulus funds to YRC. In return, the U.S. government is going to have a seat at the table to the tune of 29.6% equity stake in the company. I wonder who's going to sit in that seat. The Treasury Department pointed to the $2.2 trillion legislation as eyebrows were raised and a lot of questions were being asked, but they pointed to the legislation that Congress passed last March, which included part of that $2.2 trillion is they had a $17 billion provision for companies deemed essential to national security. So from a sheer size standpoint, of course, YRC is a big player, 30,000 employees, the fifth largest U.S. trucking firm by 2019 revenue. But as pointed out by this article, which was news to me, the company YRC also works extensively with the DoD. So the CEO of the YRC worldwide says the funds are going to be used primarily. I caught three main things, at least from the article. Number one, they're going to be covering missed pension and healthcare payments. Number two, they're going to use it for equipment and property lease payments. And then thirdly, they're going to make capital investments into the fleet. So, Greg, what are your thoughts around this big $700 million loan?
My very first thought was, I wonder what Brad Jacobs, CEO of XPO Logistics, a successful and well-run trucking company, thinks about this. That was my first thought, right? And I understand the argument that this is an essential business. This goes back to some things that have happened frequently. I say frequently, every decade or so. In 2008, 2009, 2010, we bailed out the big banks. We've bailed out the automotive makers in the past. It's that too big to fail methodology wherein we take the U.S. government and therefore the U.S. taxpayer, who never gets a dividend from it, by the way, but the U.S. government takes a position, an equity position, meaning they actually own shares in the company for a temporary period to bail out these companies. I think it's appropriate. It's appropriate if we're going to loan this kind of money to this kind of company, right, that we take an equity position. Any bank would, right? Any bank would take an equity position. Probably this is warrants, meaning we can choose to take our money or we can choose to take it in stock or something like that, or both often. But also we do and should, I hope, have a seat at the table, meaning the board, to be able to vote and protect our taxpayers' interest in this company. So personally, I don't like it. I don't like the government getting involved in companies, but if they're going to give our money or loan our money to these companies, then they absolutely need to have an equity stake wherein the U.S. taxpayer vis-a-vis the government can benefit and also protect that investment.
Yep.
But again, this is one of those situations where we're propping up a company that was teetering, and I just don't know. At the very least, it's a loan, so we should expect to get our money back. Yep.
Well, we all woke up this morning as a new shareholder, part owner of YRC Freight. Who would have thought that would have happened? Here's what I'm curious about. I love your thoughts around protecting that investment. That's so important. If it's $7 million of taxpayer funds that go into companies, it needs to be watched over. Certainly 100 times that. But what's the exit plan? How can what's the payback plan, or is there one? How quickly can the government get that investment plus something on top? Get that back and make everybody whole. I'm not sure. Greg, I'll defer to your expertise in those types of matters. But is that going to happen? And if you had to just pick a time frame, what do you think is going to play out in terms of once YRC can be in position to get the money back, or what have you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. These kind of events, they typically have fairly unique terms. They may have been mandated in the provisions in this $17 billion Treasury provision, but it will probably be a decade. If this is an EIDL, forget what EIDL stands for, but basically a disaster loan,
right?
Then it's essentially a 30-year loan.
Yep.
So they have 30 years. They start paying interest early, but then they have 30 years to pay it off. So, and I'm sure the equity stake comes down as the payoff occurs.
Yep.
So
in the article, a lot of folks that were watching this $17 billion provision were expecting a big chunk of that to go to Boeing. And of course, Boeing said thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go a different route.
Thankfully, yes.
Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. Hey, real quick, want to recognize a few folks. Let's see here. Jamin, great to have you here. He says, love it when it works out to be able to watch one of your live shows. Greg, not only do we love having Jamin be part of this show, but we've got a little secret, right? We've got a 3-part series that he's going to be leading, right?
Now it's not a secret.
Of course not. No. Speaking,
I'm looking forward to that. I mean, we need more people with expertise in transportation at Supply Chain Now, and not only does Jamin have that, but he's so up and so introspective and so studied. He learned a lot in the School of Hard Knocks, which to me is perfect for people who study the transportation trade.
Absolutely. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be releasing time frames and a lot more to come, but really looking forward to getting.
He's a fan also.
Yes. Jamin, all about transportation and logistics, more to come there. Hey, Memory is tuned in from South Africa.
Yeah.
Memory, I've enjoyed watching over the last few days. You had some pictures from work where you were out while you were making it happen. Trucks, your product was loaded. I love seeing that kind of stuff. And great to have you here. Memory says this Monday session is like my Monday sabbatical now. Great to hear all about the buzz topics. Great to have you here with us. And Keith, right, as always, he asked a great question. Hey, who is on YRC's board? That's going to be an interesting, maybe Malcolm can look up a couple of key figures on the board, but that's a great question, isn't it, Greg?
Well, it is, and I think it is interesting to learn some of these additional provisions of this YRC thing. Look, in the end, it has actually turned out to the good with some of the banks and even with some of the automakers. The government actually made money. Again, none of us ever saw any of that back, but the government actually made money on the stock in some of those companies because they were public.
Yep.
Right.
Two other quick comments, and we're going to move on to the next story. Stefan talks about how in Germany they've got the Volkswagen law, which allows them to weigh in on some of the major decisions. So it looks like a state in Germany has 20% ownership of the company. That's an interesting observation. And then Pierre says, hey, is there a successful precedent for the government successfully participating on the board of a bailout company?
That's a really, really good question. During the financial crisis, when we bailed out the banks, I really didn't pay enough attention to that because I was trying to survive personally. So I didn't pay enough attention to that to know if we took board positions on those banks.
Yep.
But that's a really good question. I think the Volkswagen law in Germany is one. And arguably, has that been successful? I don't know. That's one of the worst run automakers in Europe, in my opinion. But
spitting fire today.
I'm sure Saxony does not hold a majority position in that. But successful. I mean, Volkswagen was teetering at one time, so I don't know how that aligns with the board position that the state took.
Yep. So. A lot of great questions there. Everyone's got questions, and we'll see how in weeks and months ahead we'll get some of the answers to these questions and others about this huge loan here. Okay, so Greg, in other big news last week, of course, the USMCA is now the law of the land, has officially replaced NAFTA.
Yeah.
Tell us more. What were some of your early observations? Let's
start with the fact that the USMCA came in with a whimper. Right? Not a bang. I mean, it wasn't big news. And Scott, you and I we did an interview with Javier Diaz de Leon, the Consul General to Atlanta, and had some discussion about that. So that episode's going to drop in the next week or two, correct?
This Friday. This Friday.
Okay, there we go. Man, listen to that. First of all, Javier is a knowledgeable person. He's a huge fan of America and particularly the Southeast, and knows all the numbers. Of course, that's his job. But anyway, one of the topics that we discussed was that this has been overshadowed by COVID and societal disruption and all of that sort of thing. So this is a big deal. It's a replacement of NAFTA. So it entered into force last Wednesday, July 1st. After about 3 years of negotiations. So it's a replacement of NAFTA, particularly to address the dynamics in today's commerce. Those things being digital trade, some specific addressing of labor and environmental considerations, which weren't really thought about during the NAFTA years. And all three of those things, digital trade didn't even exist back then.
Right.
And labor and environmental considerations weren't nearly at the top of the list way back then. But the changes in things like rules of origin mean that it's more complex and more stringent to declare a product made in America or made in North America, right? I think it's important for everyone, because since we have people listening all around the world, there are only three countries in North America: Mexico, US, and Canada. So we have one of the easiest environments to create a free trade zone in the entire world,
right?
At least from a continental standpoint, right?
Yep. And Ambassador Diaz weighed in on that, the unique environment we have here, the unique opportunity.
Yeah.
And he's really excited about, to your point, what the USMCA is going to do to build on the success of NAFTA.
And I think we should all be pretty excited, because Mexico is a far different player in the world economy now than it was then. Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. But for instance, on the made in North America, so now a vehicle, and I'm just going to pick probably the most common and controversial parts, steel and aluminum, for a car to be considered made in North America, 75% of the steel and aluminum has to originate from North America, meaning US, Mexico, or Canada.
Right.
Instead of 62.5%. And all of the other complementary parts have higher requirements as well. And what that does is that forces companies to make the decision to bring business back to the States, or to pay the import tariffs and taxes that they would for even some of their second, third, fourth tier supply chain partners who might be in Europe or Canada, or Europe or China or other areas around the world, right?
Yep.
So the purpose of this also was to reduce some of the barriers for cross-border traffic, cross-border flow. And it's taken away some of the strict governmental burdensome regulations, but also it's taken away a singular format form. So the shippers and carriers are responsible for identifying that this item can be certified as USMCA compliant. That is a dual-edged sword because, companies, some carriers define the form one way and some carriers or even shippers might define it another way. I can see there being some sort of consortium needing to be produced there to do it, to make sure that is easier to comply with, right? More standard practice, but at least it's not government standard practice, which is always burdensome. So, look, I think in short, if I can be short, this brings this trade agreement to a new level. It brings us into the new century. It considers things like digital trade, and it also impacts environment and labor. For instance, is for labor cost, if at the right rate, can be considered a portion of sourcing in North America. For instance, if you pay someone more than $16 an hour, then their labor counts as sourcing in North America. If you pay them less than that, then it does not.
Yeah. So
this will actually enforce good labor practice in North America as well.
Agreed. Okay. So we picked two stories that we could probably dedicate several hours to on the front end. But for the sake of time, we're going to move right along. We're going to say hello to a few folks. Benjamin Goldklang, once again, is tuned in. That's right. Back from his run on LinkedIn. Great to have you here with us, Benjamin. Joseph Valentine. Every day is Valentine's Day. Great to have you with us here, Joseph. Arrow Singh is with us on LinkedIn. Great to have you here. It's his first time. So, Arrow, great to have you. Let's see. Patrick Kelly is back. The Produce Podcast. Looking forward to some collaboration with Patrick and his team. And Victor and Robert, I appreciate the comments there. We're not going to be able to get to that because we're going to move right along to our featured guest here. But thanks so much. Victor, by the way, Greg was curious about how many other companies are playing along with that 70% rule that you had mentioned in terms of makeup. But we'll circle back on that stuff.
Sure. Okay.
So we're going to drop the slide out of the stream because, Greg, we're really excited about this repeat guest here today. We've enjoyed some prep conversations with Mr. Tevin Taylor, Managing Director, Sales with Fedex Supply Chain. Let's bring him on in.
Yeah.
Hey, Tevin. Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good. Good morning here in Texas.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Still morning.
That's right. Easy time conversion. You're an hour behind us. So great to have you back. Hey, it's been a while. We were together last, Greg, with Tevin last February at the one and only Reverse Logistics Association yearly conference in Vegas. Really enjoyed the episode, Tevin, and it's always great to have you back. Real quick on the front end, we're going to dive into some of the things you've been managing and leading through here since that time. But let's refresh everybody's memory. What does FedEx Supply Chain do? Because I think a lot of folks are going to make assumptions, and we got to correct them.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you hit that right in the start. So FedEx Supply Chain is one of the many opcos for FedEx Corporation. We have about 12,000 employees worldwide. We're doing all the warehousing, inventory management, forward logistics, reverse logistics as part of the overall corporation. So think about, everything that's within four walls is within FedEx Supply Chain.
Whew. So how many plates are you running?
Last mile, Tevin, correct?
What's that?
Does that include last mile?
It includes transportation management. The parcel LTL side is FedEx Freight, FedEx Ground, FedEx Express.
Got it.
Which would be your last mile. Yeah.
So you are the fulfillment and distribution facilities feeding those vehicles to deliver, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We like to call it the force multiplier. So if you have the warehouse and you have the distribution and the transportation, you kind of have that end-to-end look, and you have the inbound transportation, you can kind of put the whole supply chain together.
Got it.
Love it. All right. So shifting gears a little bit here. Of course, the pandemic environment we've all been fighting through for months now. Tell us about some of the cool things that FedEx supply chain has jumped in the global fight against COVID-19.
Sure. Well, quite simply, guys, I'm really fortunate to be part of a dedicated and quality-driven global team of about 500,000 committed employees that are really delivering the FedEx Purple Promise, which is making every FedEx experience outstanding. So our people have been and remain on the front lines of the fight against COVID-19. So helping to deliver relief supplies, medical supplies, test kits, some of the things we've done since the beginning of 2020, which ironically, when we met in Vegas, we talked about COVID, but back then it was disrupting the supply chain from a manufacturing standpoint.
Right.
I don't think anybody ever would have dreamed that this thing would blow up like it has. But since that early time, we've transported over 1,600 humanitarian aid shipments, over 6 million masks, 1.5 million shipments of PPE, set up medical shelters, 200,000 boxes to food banks, and much more. You look at the network, and what we've had to do is, I don't want to say reconfigure, but the best approach is just adapt to the changing needs of what's going on in the supply chain. So the flights that used to carry cargo beneath for passenger airlines started disappearing. So charter flights with FedEx Logistics have started taking that capacity. So where the airline industry is suffering, our charter industry is actually starting to see quite an uplift. But then we've seen changes in deliveries to retail and business as well. So quite a bit of change with COVID-19, but just proud of our 500,000 teammates that are supporting the industry and supporting our customers and each other. It's a terrible thing going on with the pandemic, and look forward to the day we don't have to talk about it, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. Hey, real quick, before Greg's going to ask you a question about e-commerce, but real quick observation. I think over the weekend I was reading a piece. You mentioned aviation, that whole industry. The 747 is rumored to be being phased out in short order, and one of the big issues that's delaying that is air cargo and how they're leveraging those platforms during these unique times. So I know you're a bit of a aviation buff, aren't you, Tevin?
I am. 747 wasn't my favorite though. It's like the 1970s Caprice. It's a big gas guzzling airplane.
Yeah.
The first one I ever went into was at UPS. So I was a cargo handler at DFW in the late 90s when I was in high school. And I remember climbing up to the cockpit and just looking out and seeing how high I was. But those 4 engines in that size aircraft, I see them phasing those out in short order for sure.
That's right. That was the thrust of this article.
Part of the reason that they can afford it is because rates are up, right? Because the reason, there's nothing wrong with the airframe of a 747. It's just that it's got old gas guzzling engines. It's a lot of aircraft to move through the air, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. And I appreciate first of all, your participation in helping to get necessary supplies and PPE and medical supplies and that sort of thing around the world, not just in the States. I think at least in the States, we think of FedEx as our freight company, but really you guys are of course global. But tell us a little bit about anything you're doing, because e-commerce is changing so dramatically, Tevin, and the volume is up so much. How are you guys adapting to that, and what kind of things have you done to enable and increase capacity or whatever there?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the greatest opportunities in front of the transportation and logistics industry is really how you successfully manage the growth of e-commerce. And that was before the pandemic. E-commerce was already becoming, quite the source of growth for many companies. We unfortunately had to flip the switch faster than I think everyone wanted it. And I'll say the companies that are not omni-channel and not in the e-commerce space, they're suffering if they didn't get a head start on it. But from our standpoint, online shopping has grown at an enormous pace. We're expecting the parcel volume to double from 50 million to 100 million packages per day in the next 6 years. So think about that. You're going to double the amount in the next 6 years. And I don't know about you. I still love going to retail. I'm just a creature of habit, and like to go see, touch, feel the product. But you know what? When you're locked away at home and you're working from home and you don't have access to retail, a lot of us have turned to e-commerce, and I actually think that number is going to exceed 100 million packages per day. You're seeing that's just the option, and as retail has to adjust, and you're seeing a lot of retail stores, unfortunately, with the strain of pandemic, have gone down. I see the number going up. So the benefit with FedEx and FedEx Logistics, which FedEx Logistics is really the operating company FedEx Supply Chain sits underneath, we came up with FedEx Fulfillment, which is an all-in-one e-commerce logistics solution. So we have the full bundle for our small and mid-sized customers that don't need that dedicated warehouse. We have warehousing, fulfillment, order management, transportation management, and returns all in one warehouse, all for the small and mid-sized clients. So the ones that didn't get on board with omni-channel now have that opportunity. They just talk to FedEx. We work with them. We inventory their product. We set up an interface with IT. Their orders come to us. We drop them. They go to I go online to a smaller mid-sized company that really doesn't have access to big warehouses, and now they can do all that within one package with FedEx.
That's a great option. Look, so many companies, they think singularly, right? They think that they have to be engaged with Amazon to do that thing. But even if you use Amazon as a marketplace, companies like what you're doing at FedEx and other companies give companies the option to be able to handle more of it themselves or to handle it outside of that ecosystem and I think limit their exposure, right? I think we've seen some of the things that Amazon has done in the last few years. We all know that they're copying their customers' goods and things like that. So there are, and I'm sure you've seen this, Tev. Actually, I'd ask you if you've seen this. There are lots of brands leaving or at least looking for alternatives so that they are not completely beholden to a single marketplace or a single logistics provider. Is that what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I've never heard of the company you're talking about, but it sounds like
most people haven't. Let me explain.
They might take advantage of having information and data on a customer and trying to create products and services to go acquire customers. Our goal at FedEx is not to consume the customer's business, but to help them and complement what they do best, right?
Right.
They create a product or a service. It's our job to be their partner and to be their solution in the logistics space and transportation. And to your point, we are definitely helping to compete against that company you mentioned earlier.
Love it. Hey, real quick, Greg, speaking of partnerships, I know there's a big one has been brewing at FedEx we're going to talk about, but I want to recognize a few folks. Kyle Van Artsen, his first time here with us. Kyle, great to have you here. Looking forward to your input in the weeks ahead. Mohib, we were talking aviation a minute ago. Mohib, Professor Mohib. That's right, at Wichita State University, the air capital of the world, there being Wichita, Kansas. Great to have him with us here as well. All right, Greg, let's talk about this big news.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we heard about this, and we've had the opportunity to talk with you a little bit offline about this, Tevin, but tell us about FedEx and Microsoft joining forces. What does that mean? What is it? And how do you think it benefits the marketplace?
So FedEx is continuously looking for and seeking out partnerships that give us the opportunity to offer flexibility and agility for our customers. So not only just for their supply chain, but also tracking shipments and making fast and informed decisions. So the example with FedEx and Microsoft that was announced in May, you might have seen Fred Smith's interview with Microsoft CEO. But we announced the partnership, and the first real offering is something called Fedex Surround. So Fedex Surround is a multi-year collaboration to transform how commerce happens, and it's combining the two networks. So a global digital logistics network of FedEx with the power of Microsoft's intelligent cloud. So you put those two things together, and it's going to allow businesses to enhance visibility into their supply chain by leveraging data, artificial intelligence, and providing real-time analytics into shipping and tracking. So you got to think like the knowledge of that package and where it's moving. I don't know if y'all remember 20 years ago when it was so cool just to track a package. And then years later, it became just normal. I mean, you see the side of a Domino's truck and you can order a pizza and know where your pizza is in the cycle. Right. And that was revolutionary in the shipping business 20 years ago. Now it's table stakes, which we all know. Yeah. This takes it a further step. It takes it down the path of understanding conditions within the supply chain, whether there's severe weather, natural disasters, a COVID crisis, right? Mechanical delays, clearance delays, all the things you see that happen now can really help you as a customer look into your supply chain and make decisions, quick decisions. So not 2 days later, you find out something's on back order. Not 2 days later, you find out the product was damaged or wasn't really in inventory. It's going to be real-time data that's going to allow supply chains to adapt. So the partnership is brand new. There's a lot more information coming out in the coming weeks and months. I know we're doing some pilots here in late summer, so probably next month you'll hear more information on it. I'm so excited about what we're going to do with Microsoft because it's game-changing activity in supply chain that will really make a difference.
Love it. It helps you continue connecting people and possibilities, right? And that's a big theme of what you and your team does to fulfill that purple promise. I forgot about that phrase from our time in February.
And and also noted that you're wearing a purple polo, I assume logoed. Yep. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Yep.
All right. So we got to
if you got to have company colors, purple is one of my favorite.
That's right. Good. All right, so let's recognize a few of our comments. We got a comment from Twitch, Sam Cox. He's talking about how omni-channel is really solid right now. Clearly, especially with all the brick and mortar challenges we're seeing, folks, if they haven't already figured out their omni-channel strategy, they're behind the 8 ball for sure. So great to have you with us on Twitch, Sam. Let's see here. Also, Sylvia Judy. So you got a little bit of a fan in Charleston, Tevin. Sylvia Judy, a regular live streamer participant with us here. Greetings from Charleston. FedEx Supply Chain has the right idea. Enhance your portfolio and be inclusive with new solutions. Good stuff there from Sylvia. Okay. So, and some of the folks, we can't get to all your comments and questions for the sake of time. We really appreciate it. We'll circle back as we've got time for. I've got a question here. Speaking of connecting the world and connecting people and possibilities and what have you, share some more examples of how you're doing just that at FedEx Supply Chain, Tevin.
Sure. So the FedEx Logistics operating company, our mere existence is innovative in its approach and the fact that we're creating value for our customers across the enterprise, right? So we are called the FedEx Force Multiplier because what we offer is a portfolio of specialized logistics solutions that really enable customers to reach commercial and business destinations anywhere in the world. So what that means is you have the FedEx Logistics arm of the company that provides supply chain, customs clearance, freight forwarding, all the things that are really specialized. What they do is they complement transportation services offered by FedEx Express, FedEx Ground, and FedEx Freight. Yep. So you look at the transportation, and all we're doing is we're adding the force multiplier by strengthening those offerings and reaching new markets. Some of the things we've done lately, you might have seen, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but on the Late Show, we actually debuted our same-day bot, which is called Roxo. It's an autonomous delivery vehicle, and we started testing it in different markets. We actually tested it delivering pizza just to see how people reacted. Internationally,
how did people react?
Yeah.
Some markets were stronger than others.
What does it look like? I have not seen a picture of it, Tevin. What's it look like?
I'm going to have to give you a picture. It's, it stands about 3.5 feet tall. It's a box. It's branded FedEx, and it actually has eyes and sensors all around it. So it can detect, if it's on the sidewalk, it can detect if someone's in its way. It follows all traffic laws, which are good. But the greatest thing about this delivery bot is going to be, it's going to be in urban areas, same day deliveries, FedEx Office, just like all delivery aspects and last mile, different markets are going to have to adapt to how it operates and how it works. So it was invented by the Segway inventor, believe it or not.
Okay.
So it's actually being tested. I'll send you all some information. Maybe it's something we could talk about at a later.
Oh, there we go.
For our viewers, if you're interested.
So it debuted on the Late Show. Does Roxo have a sense of humor, Tevin?
Almost as good as Greg's. Almost as good as Greg's.
That's
interesting
good
as well.
All right. So I want to shift gears. But was there any other really compelling example you wanted to share in terms of how you're helping companies make these connections, or can I move right along to the? Go ahead, Greg.
I just want to go back to one, because I saw one question come through the stream, and the question was, by Stefan, also in Texas, by the way, can you essentially open an e-commerce site and have all of the fulfillment, warehousing, receiving, and shipping done by FedEx? I think that's not everything you do, but I think that's essentially what you're describing, Tevin. Is that correct? Is that a fair estimation?
We do that for many customers today. If we're opening a site, a dedicated warehouse, that's going to be a larger customer. So when you have a 300,000 square foot warehouse with 600 employees operating in a pick, pack, and ship environment, and usually, nowadays the new warehouses are fully automated.
Right.
But that warehouse, I'll just say for some retailers where we run their e-commerce branch, that is a dedicated site. The FedEx fulfillment warehouses I'm talking about, where we have them strategically located within the country, that is a multi-client facility. So you have thousands of small and mid-sized businesses that have inventory in that warehouse where we're picking and packing and shipping every day. So their orders might be only 50 to 100 orders a day. But when you mix that with all the other small and mid-sized businesses, it makes for a warehouse.
And you guys get enough economies of scale by accumulating all those companies to make it affordable for those smaller e-commerce providers? Wow.
We make it affordable and very competitive as well. And think about it, it's all in one, remember. So it's transportation and the warehousing all put together.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
All right. One last major question before we make sure folks know how to connect with you, Tevin. And I believe we included your LinkedIn profile in the show notes here today to make it easy for folks. Challenging time, undoubtedly. It's as we all know, it's going to be different for months, and in some cases permanently different. Let's talk about people. Let's talk about you and FedEx's commitment to the people involved across the world of supply chain and beyond. What are some of the things you are doing there?
That's very pertinent at this time. I never thought this would be a question ever on an interview, but right now it's important people understand how companies are treating individuals. And our company was founded, Fred Smith, when he founded the company, he made sure we had a people first philosophy. As a matter of fact, the philosophy he started with was called PSP, People, Service, Profit. And the first P is taking care of your people. If you take care of your people, you lead them, you coach them, you mentor them, you train them. They offer great service, excellent service, which is the Purple Promise, and then you profit in the end. Profits last. You don't focus on the profit, you focus on the people. And we respect for everyone and how they operate. So our diverse workforce and supplier base supports that culture. We believe in investing in our people and diversity programs, which definitely make us stronger as a company. One thing I've learned throughout my career is that the most important aspect in any leader's job, it's the people. So you got to take care of your people, and helping others be their best, providing the support and information they need to do their jobs. So it's one of the many reasons FedEx is named one of the top 10 most admired companies in the world by Fortune magazine. It also helps us with attracting talent and retaining talent for that matter. So I'm proud to be a FedExer. It's great what we do for our people, but now is definitely the time as leaders. We need to make sure we're taking care of the workforce and taking care of each other and showing dignity and respect to the people.
Well put. Okay, I know you've got a big meeting at the top of the hour, so we'll got to let you go here. But real quick, what's the best way for folks to connect with some of the cool things y'all are doing at FedEx and connect with you, Tevin?
You can go to my LinkedIn profile, obviously, or you can email me at tevin.taylor@fedex.com.
Is that easy?
Writing that down.
Unless you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you can email Greg, and Greg will send it to me.
That's right. Oh boy, we're putting the ticker.
No direct communication.
Oh,
with
no, I think that was on my
Chief.
list. I'm not supposed to talk about Kansas City.
And a little background for our listeners. So there's a healthy little rivalry between the Dallas Cowboys and Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, that's Greg and Tevin. Their loyalties lie there. So, all right. Well, Tevin, that's right. And the Aggies. Tevin, always a pleasure. I appreciate what you and FedEx are doing during these incredibly challenging times for everybody. And looking forward to reconnecting with you down the road here just a little bit.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Tevin.
Appreciate it. Keep it up.
All right. And just like that, Tevin Taylor, Managing Director Sales with FedEx Supply Chain, is back to work, right? I'm sure they've got a...
That dude bleeds purple. I got to tell you that whole construction that they have. We've had a lot of questions in the feed here, but that whole construct that they've created enables companies to virtually be what I think a good retailer is, and that is a good brand manager, a good gaining a good understanding of your customer base, servicing them well, and then having the back office of the logistics be handled by the pros.
Yep.
And I think more and more of these retailers, whether they are, well, they're all going to have to be e-commerce, right?
Yep.
They're going to have some e-commerce, but that solution that he's talking about is also valuable for retailers that have bricks and mortar stores as well.
Yep.
So.
Agreed. Hey, I'm simple-minded. I love the PSP, right? People first, profit last. That really, out of a lot of things he shared there, and I love how serious they are about connecting and creating opportunities. That really stood out. Memory loves PSP as well. We're kindred spirits there, Memory. Keith Singleton says 4 stakeholders: owners, vendors, customers, employees. They're equal partners. Well said there, Keith. And I think that's all the comments for now. So, Greg, we are running hard and fast here today on the buzz. You ready to jump back into our last 2 headlines for the day?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get back to the news, Scott.
All right, back to the news, but really loved Tevin's perspective he shared here today on the buzz. All right, so now we are talking about food manufacturers still trying to play catch up while preparing for a possible second wave. We want to be optimistic around here, but who knows? We're seeing a variety of numbers. So in this story from Annie Gasparo over at the Wall Street Journal, Conagra Brands, easy for you to say, says high demand for grocery goods isn't going away. So the company continues to invest more and more into increasing its manufacturing capacity. We saw similar stories come out of the McCormick company, McCormick Spice Company, I think.
Right.
They talked last week about basically bringing online in terms of capacity a whole nother plant without building the plant. So a lot of food companies are trying to figure out any which way they can add capacity. So a lot of folks, Greg, I know you're familiar with some of these Conagra product lines: Hunt's tomatoes, Healthy Choice meals, Bird's Eye frozen vegetables, and that's just a few of them.
Yeah.
Sales of its products in the quarter that ended May 31st across the whole portfolio up 22%. So Conagra's CEO Sean Connolly says, quote, "We are doing everything in our power to add additional capacity, but it's going to be strained. Demand remains elevated, and it remains challenging to play catch up on base inventory levels, much less build safety stock," end quote. Yeah. So the article stated that food companies see a once-in-a-generation chance for them to gain market share. And specifically, it's an opportunity to win back consumers that may have defected to, quote, niche trendy brands in recent years. All right, so I'm going to tell myself a little bit here. So it appears that Conagra is making the most of the opportunity. In the latest quarter, retail sales rose 62% for Chef Boyardee pasta. Greg, I don't know if you like mini ravioli like I do. That's kind of one of my guilty pleasures. But 62%. Holy cow, 62% across Chef Boyardee. It's up 39% for its Hebrew National Meats line.
Now that I know. First of all, those are some of the best hot dogs you will ever eat. This is not a paid endorsement.
Right.
I'm surprised that there's that much room upward for instance, in Hebrew National. I guess I thought everybody knew about this brand, right?
Yep.
But it is interesting. What I think we're seeing here is that the big companies with big and sophisticated supply chains who are able to either stay in stock or recover rapidly and communicate effectively with the marketplace, they're starting to see the payoff of that in the marketplace.
Yes, sage wisdom as always from Greg White. So here's the $1 trillion question, though. Will the food giants retain and keep these old and new consumers once we get into the real post-pandemic environment? That's going to be they're going to be clawing to keep them.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go, Greg. Question for you. All the rage and all the talk, all the talking heads have been talking about resilient supply chains, and we know why. That's going to be important. Always has been. Maybe it just gains a little extra luster here, but maybe it's time we talk about the resilience of this record-breaking demand that is persisting. What's your take here, Greg?
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me a little bit of time to think about that. I got the question before the show, so I appreciate that. I think we'll see that carry for some time to come. As it turns out, I was driving out of my neighborhood yesterday, and I saw one of my neighbors had gotten a new television, left the box out by the dumpster because the garbage was coming, and it was a Sony television. And I thought, is Sony even still in business? I mean, I think and the reason I say that is, of course, they are incredible quality. They basically invented the quality electronic design, supply chain, retail marketplace. But I think these companies have to remain in contact with their customers and continue to create value in the brand, because I think consumers over time, they'll trend back towards whatever the trend is. It may not be niche products, but I have a feeling that it will. I mean, our society is more customized, more personalized every single day.
Right.
So it's going to be difficult for these brands to do that. But what I do see happening in terms of demand is I see a shift. I can tell you this, it's hit us squarely in the pocketbook from a positive standpoint. And also it's hit me personally in the waistline from a positive standpoint to not be eating in restaurants all the time.
Right.
I have dropped like 8-9 pounds, and I've been able to keep it off by not eating in I'm certain that's what it is. And I think people are going to see the results of that, and it will sustain for some period of time. Now, ultimately, look, we're just human beings. We're going to forget those things, and we're going to go back. Think about how we thought the world had changed after the last financial crisis, right? In 2008 to 2013. And look at how quickly we forgot all of that.
We're really good
back to our old ways, right?
Yes, we're really good at we're like a great closer in Major League Baseball. You got to quickly forget about the last blown save and keep on moving. So we'll see what sticks this go around. I want to read a couple comments before we get to our last headline here. Professor Mohib is going back to the FedEx segment. He says, wow, this is innovative. FedEx sharing warehouses for businesses. This is very competitive with Amazon, but more with 4PL. Impressive. Good stuff there from the professor. Our buddy, Fred Tolbert says, I feel the buzz all the way down to my toes. It's a great time to be in supply chain. I agree, Fred.
Yes,
Looking forward to reconnecting back with you again real soon here. By the way, Arrow, you had some great questions. We had some guidelines in terms of what we could ask Tevin about and what we couldn't. We'll try to connect you with Tevin and get maybe his perspective on your questions you've asked. Let's see here. Stefan says, Professor Mohib, I agree. And businesses do not have to worry about finding the right warehouse. And in addition to working from home, companies can choose their headquarters or local offices unrelated to best location. Great comments there from Stefan. The one and only Corinne Bursa weighs in as well. Corinne, hopefully this finds you well this morning. Combination of great digital planning and physical execution. Many have narrowed their assortments, talking about food companies and whatnot, to run with greater efficiency and resiliency. Well put, Corinne. And looking forward, can we let that secret out of the bag?
Yeah, let's do it.
We're going to be kicking off a new supply chain technology focused series to kind of complement Tequila Sunrise, but a new series featuring Corinne and really Greg and probably some guests talking about some of the latest and greatest developments in the space. So Corinne is a subject matter expert, which most of the market already understands that already. So looking forward to the new series.
So one of the things we want to do there, just real quick, is so Tequila Sunrise is about investment and deals and growth and even implosions in supply chain. This series is going to be about what technology can do for you. And we've had a series of questions. So we'll talk about all the naturals: planning, execution, responsiveness. I'm sure we'll talk about all of the keywords: AI, IoT, blockchain, all of those things. And what Corinne wants to do is to put a really practical spin on it. Here's what it is, here's what it does, and here's what it means for you, and how to, hopefully we can close the gap for how do you employ that in your business.
Excellent clarification. That was not in my notes here today, so thank you for weighing in.
And I have no notes as usual.
That's an important distinction because, Greg, there's a reason why Greg leads that series, Tequila Sunrise, because of his wealth of experience in that investment, M&A, and entrepreneurial and startup and you name it, that whole space. And it's a very hot space for all things supply chain, which is why this is one of the best times to be in the industry.
Yeah.
And then, of course, to be able to have Greg and Corinne and guests weigh in on the constant evolution and innovation in supply chain technology, that's going to be a really cool series coming online. So Corinne, thanks for joining here today. Looking forward to that series kicking off. Okay, one last comment. We're going to have to dive real quick. We may run a few minutes over here. Memory asked an interesting question. Has anyone been to a bank during lockdown? Banks need to change how they operate. Looks like she stood in a queue for 2 hours for services they still insist can't be done over the phone or internet. Interesting, Memory. I wonder if everyone else has similar experiences. We've been, banking remote since, mid-March.
So Memory is in South Africa, and in Northern Africa, where many people have never been banked in the traditional way, they have completely eschewed traditional banking, and a lot of the banking is done using applications on phones and things like that. So Memory, that's really a holdover that we largely have in the States as well, and probably a propping up of old banking methodologies. But I feel like that will and continues to need to change. One of the cruel ironies is in Atlanta, the joke is on every street corner, there's 2 banks and 2 drugstores, right? So now on one of the corners near my house, they tore down one of the drugstores, and now it's going to be 3 banks, 3 physical banks, and 1 drugstore on a corner. I can't imagine why anyone is building banks right now, physical banks.
Well, on that note, speaking of banks, Stefan says our local branch is closed, and we have to drive 30 minutes to get cash deposited. That will change undoubtedly, or those banks won't be around. So we'll see how this continues to evolve. Corinne weighs in. Going back to that series, she says, can't wait to explore how technology plays a pivotal role in accelerating supply chain and business success. Well said, Corinne.
Much more concisely said by the marketing expert.
That's right.
Thank you, Corinne.
And Keith Singleton, you've got a comment here where you think the virus will force this discipline. Hey, weigh in. Let me know which discipline you're referring to, and would love to hear that thought through. Okay, so this story also came up last week. Greg, I want you to walk us through this. This is all about the U.S. government's plan to crack down on some potential human rights abuses in global supply chain. Tell us more.
Not potential, well documented human rights abuses, and ongoing, and actually increasing in the last year, which is a bit of a travesty. If anyone knows me, you know what a hawk I am for ethical supply chain, be that sourcing of goods or fair trade or obviously human rights. And this harkened back to a discussion Scott and I had some weeks ago about this Xinjiang province in China, where the Department of Homeland Security and other U.S. government agencies took the position, this is a strong statement, took the position of assuming that companies that operate in this region were conducting unethical and, in fact, forced labor trade practices unless they could certify otherwise. And to date, no company has been certified otherwise, just to be clear. This is a backdrop for this story. But just recently, Department of Homeland Security said they're going to take on increased enforcement action against active and they are actively investigating companies and corporate officials who knowingly benefit from forced labor and other human rights abuses in this province. That includes the companies that are that are operating here, but also the companies that benefit from it. So those companies might be 3 or 4 tiers up the supply chain. Companies like Apple and Nike and others, about 85 others, have been identified as benefiting from this type of supply chain in the way that some of them, to be fair to Apple and Nike particularly, because we named them, they have initiatives to try and uncover and eradicate this, or at least uncover it. But other companies are disavowing knowledge and using that as sort of a buffer against their culpability here.
Obfuscation, right?
Obfuscation. That's a very good term. Thank you. So the specific issue here is, and some of you may have heard about this, there's about 1.5 million Uyghurs. So that's a tribe of Muslims and then other minorities in this province that are forced into labor camps under the guise of education or re-education. If you've ever read any George Orwell novels or any Marxist doctrine, they are involved heavily in the electronics and apparel industries. So in response to that, also on June 17th, President Trump signed a law authorizing sanctions against Chinese officials. So the commitment is definitely there by the U.S. government. And as you can see, they're going to not just enforce against Chinese companies, which is virtually impossible, but also against the companies that benefit, that bring the goods into the States. Unfortunately, as late as October 2019, we saw an increase in goods brought into U.S. supply chains based on the forced labor of these people. So, the point of this is that there is the ability, and the U.S. government, the Department of Labor, has a comply chain site and a comply chain initiative that allows companies to investigate their suppliers and determine whether they are in areas where they could be using unethical or even forced labor practices. This is not a unique problem to China. It's finally starting to come to the fore. And I think congratulations to the U.S. government for not only holding China, but also companies that do business in the States, and also disallowing this obfuscation and lack of culpability by the companies that try to separate themselves by 2 or 3 layers in the supply chain.
Yes, it's a shame. It's 2020, and we're talking about taking advantage of human rights abuses. Yeah, slavery. That's right. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, there's no other way to say it, really. Yeah.
Yep. Good point. Stefan says, even though the whole economy is changing to better environmental and humanitarian views, the government has to put pressure on companies worldwide. The change is too slow.
Amen.
Well put, Stefan.
And China's not even the biggest. I mean, they're not even the biggest slave trade country in the world. India has a much bigger problem. It's just that India has been taking a much, much more active role in reducing slave labor.
So Keith weighs in. Cheap labor is the bane of democracy. It is a plague worse than COVID-19. That's we gotta get Keith on another show. We had him on a few months back. Well, it's been a part of a year ago now. We got to have him back on. All right. So what we wanted to do. So Greg, good stuff here as always. I want to point out, we're fans of Supply Chain Dive, and we're not paid to promote anybody. They're a great news source,
right,
to covering global supply chain. By the way, Megan Ford, both of the articles were Megan's this go around.
Yeah, Morgan.
Oh, Morgan. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Morgan Ford. My eyes.
Yeah,
I get
purely by chance, right?
That's right. Morgan Ford. So who knows? Doing good work there. Y'all check out Supply Chain Dive and Morgan's reporting. Okay, so Greg, we are about 5 minutes over, but I do want to share.
We're doing pretty good this week.
That's right. So in recent weeks, especially, and I'll speak for myself here, but really trying to get out there and learn from others and understand perspective, especially with the blind spots I've got that we all have in our perspective. Looking forward to this event, July 15th. We're going to have a frank conversation, and we're going to lots of learning and sharing all about race and industry. And it's been interesting, Greg, to see some of the comments and some of the social media conversations we've been having. I've been trying to invite those folks, whether it's similar sentiment or completely different sentiment. Hey, come together. Let's have these frank conversations. July 15th, we're very pleased to help facilitate between the panel we've gathered, which is a home run panel, and of course, getting the perspective and insights from our global audience. It should be a very compelling event on July 15th, right?
No doubt. It's a conversation that needs to be had. One of the conversations we've had or I've seen is there such a thing as unconscious bias?
Yeah.
Well, be it unconscious or subconscious, let's not mince words. There is undoubtedly bias. Everybody has bias, right? I mean, everybody has bias regardless of what it's about. You have a point of view. And you have that point of view based on either knowledge or ignorance. And all this is about is trying to get people to recognize and acknowledge, and frankly, to just come together and talk about it and figure out how to resolve it. As we've said before, this is a difficult conversation, but the difficult conversations should be the ones that cause this conversation to need to be had to begin with. Right?
Yeah.
Those conversations that offend or belittle or out and out, whatever you want to call it, classify people.
Right.
Those conversations are the dangerous ones.
Agreed. All right. So all you got to bring is an open mind and a willingness to learn. And I promise you're going to be enlightened. I'm looking forward. I've been looking forward since we had it scheduled 2 months ago, roughly, between Tandria and David and DC, just their perspective, and then what the audience is going to weigh in on, their observations and experiences. It's going to be a special event, July 15th. Go to supplychainnowradio.com to sign up. And on that note, Greg, whether you're going to check out our podcast, our live streams, sign up for some of our events, you name it, a variety of resources, supplychainnowradio.com. And if you can't find what you're looking for, Greg, we usually point folks to Amanda, right?
Yeah, right. Our chief marketing officer, Amanda, at supplychainnowradio.com. Amanda and Clay, the dog, our marketing heroes who, by the way, have got us a new URL that we're going to start to roll out. We don't know exactly when because Scott and I aren't allowed to know that. But goodness. Soon, digital kills the radio star, and it will just be supplychainnow.com. So thanks to the team for securing that. Somehow, miraculously, it was held by somebody else for a long, long time. But thanks for introducing this new generation of Supply Chain Now to the world.
Absolutely. Really appreciate all the comments and questions here today. Sorry, big Monday. Everybody was raring to go after the holiday. Really appreciate the participation. Apologies for not being able to get to all of the comments. We'll try to connect folks via social media and LinkedIn. Hey, if you didn't get to share or ask a question or weigh in, join our Supply Chain Now Insiders group, especially on LinkedIn. Yep. And let's move the discussion there. I saw what I love, Greg, is when we see participants on the buzz kind of connect with each other and conversate in the comments. Hey, bring all that over to our insiders group. We'd love to be able to help foster, much like FedEx, help foster a community and help make connections as best we can. So on that note, Greg, pleasure. Sorry we went 10 minutes over. We're breaking all records here today. Great buzz. A pleasure to do it with you, Greg White.
Yeah,
to our audience,
likewise. Welcome back.
You bet. To our audience, the challenge that continues and persists: do good, give forward, but be the change that's needed here today. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.